We all know how big of a problem waste is. We find it at the top of our mountains like Mount Everest. We find it in the bottom of our oceans. I've spent the past 25 years dedicating my life to waste, partly thinking about how to solve it, but in the process discovering a lot of strange anomalies I want to share with you today. The very first one, when I was studying economics, and if you've taken economics class, all you do all day is draw economic supply and demand curves like this ad nauseum and think about what happens when demand changes or supply changes. So if we take a random product like diapers, if we buy more, then the price ought to go up. And as a parent of 4, I've certainly contributed to the demand and perhaps rising prices of diapers. This is the easy part. But every diaper we buy will become a used diaper. So what's the supply and demand of used diapers? And I would even say not only does every diaper become one, but there is more weight of dirty diapers produced every year than new ones. And so there's phenomenal supply. But where's the demand? What would you pay for a bunch of used diapers? And I'll give you some today if you're happy to buy them from me. Would it be a low price? Would it be zero? Would you have to be paid to get rid of it? And I would argue that's probably the case. There's not actually positive demand. There is, in fact, negative demand. We have to pay to get rid of them. And in fact, no economics textbooks explores the concept of negative demand or the intersect happening in the negative quadrant. Yet that is actually the legal definition of waste in some countries like Japan. It's the only material that we are willing to pay to get rid of. And for how big of a point that is, isn't it interesting that the garbage industry will one day legally own everything we possess, with no exception? 99% of what we buy, we will have paid a garbage company to take it off our hands within the year of purchase. So how did we get to this sort of crazy outcome? It's important to note, all organisms have outputs that are useless to itself. A gazelle can't breathe in the air it exhales. It certainly can't eat its own poop. But these outputs that are useless to the generator are very useful inputs to other organisms. And there is no such thing as a useless output that is not a useful input to someone else, except for us. Now let's remember, 75, 100 years ago, if we were sitting in this auditorium today, the chair we would be sitting on would be made from wood, maybe some bits of metal. If we're eating food, it would have been probably packaged in its own skin. And the clothing we'd be wearing would be made from cotton, wool, maybe silk. Today, let's reflect on where we are. The chairs we're sitting in are made from advanced plastics. The food we voted for today is all packaged in plastics and all sorts of other things. And 60% of the textiles we're wearing are advanced materials like nylon and polyester and so on. And these are not just useless to us when we're done with them, but they're useless to nature as well. It doesn't have the digestive systems yet to deal with all this. And then at the very same time when these materials came onto the scene, we compounded this by inventing consumerism. Back 100 years ago, we would buy 2 apparel items a year and wear them for 20 years before disposal. Today, we buy 66 apparel items a year and wear them just a few times before disposal. So why? Why do we vote for this? This is a positive photo from the 1950s from Life magazine celebrating the unbelievable convenience of disposability. And that's why we vote for it every day. So where do all these outputs go? A huge amount, and it's hard to measure this, but probably about 20 to 25% is still informally disposed. That's just a fancy word for litter. In countries that have regulations and can afford these regulations, the waste is typically either burned or buried, which is really synonymous to how to get rid of it while obeying the laws of the land in the cheapest possible way. So countries that are very advanced on waste regulations like Korea or Japan or Switzerland or Germany will have anti-landfill regulation. And countries maybe just slightly less advanced like Australia, Canada, here in the United States, the minimum threshold will be landfilling. Amazing, the only legal rule we have in circular economy is not littering. That's the only thing that we have to do properly or we get fined for or go to jail for. Everything else is an open system. And only a tiny percent is recycled. When we think about recycling and we ask average citizens how to think about it, we think of it as a public service, almost like medicine. But there is no Hippocratic oath in the world of recycling. No recycling company in the world is bound by a law that says they must recycle anything they collect. So it's an open system. What makes things recyclable has nothing to do with the ability to recycle them, because everything can be. It has entirely only to do with whether the garbage company doing it can make money, bound by this equation. Garbage companies have the cost of collecting, sorting, and processing that waste, and they compare that to what they can sell the outputs for. That is the only thing that drives circular economy, recyclability, or compostability. Let me sort of illustrate this for you. Imagine in front of you appear two cups right now, one from solid gold, the other from plastic, but both filthy and dirty. And my goal was that you would take the cup, clean it at your own volition, no one's watching, and enjoy it again, effectively make it circular. I imagine your knee-jerk reaction would be, let's take the gold cup because it's valuable and awesome and not a problem to clean it, and throw away the plastic one. So how do I get you to take the plastic one? I think the only way to do it is add some money to the equation. And at some amount of money, I bet you I'd get you just as happy as the gold cup. So the value has to be in that object if we want natural circularity. But the problem is, the biggest megatrend today in object design is cost reduction. Everything is cheaper tomorrow than today, across everything, our clothing to our packaging and so on. Here for packaging, for example, when bottles stopped being reusable in the United States in the 1950s, the first package form was aluminum. Then to make it cheaper, we went to plastic, then cartons, and then pouches. The line is the actual rate of recycling for these forms in the US today. You could see how it crashes down. Not because one is more or less recyclable than the other, because one is more profitable to recycle than the other. So the other option is we have to, like the plastic cup, give money to the system. If we do, anything can get recycled. We've recently celebrated 1 billion cigarette butts recycled, or over 100 million pounds of flexible film, or guitar string, or shoes, all the way to 100 million contact lenses, to pharmaceutical blister packs. I mean, anything can get recycled. It just requires either the object having the money embedded in it, or to infuse the system with the right amount of money to allow it to go around. Now, sure, we can recycle our clothing if we want to, our beverage packaging, our shoes, absolutely. Either it has to have the money in it, like the beverage packaging does, or in the other examples, we have to infuse it. But we only then recover the material these things are made from. If we shift it to reuse, we valorize every aspect of that object. No need to remanufacture it again. And the amazing part is this is exactly what the world was less than 100 years ago. We darned our socks. We had milk delivered from a milkman. We cobbled our shoes. And again, we have to be very empathetic why we abandoned this voluntarily. It's all because of convenience. It's much easier when your shirt has a hole in it to throw it out and buy a new one than to get out a needle and thread and fix it. So to bring reuse to scale, as we have, for example, in France, it can work with hundreds of products, whether it's home care, personal care, food products, beverage products, and fully reusable packaging. We need to make reuse feel like a throwaway system, because that's what we want. I believe the foundational solution to waste is to honor our past, except to modernize it, and to really be empathetic to our own nature and what we want and what we vote for. Thank you.